Okay, so let me start by talking about just a simple truism. Certainly in the United States, there's been a tremendous rise in the level of anxiety. And wherever I go in the Western world, okay, in Europe, and in the Southern Hemisphere as well, the most frequent topic I'm asked to talk about is anxiety. I'm going to talk about managing anxiety in yourselves as well as in your children. So I'm not going to only focus on children here, okay? Because everything is inextricably intertwined. And what you see here is just a bunch of statistics that show that especially in emerging adulthood, there's been a rise in levels of anxiety. Why am I showing you the monkeys? I have not lost it. Here's the reason for the monkeys. It says in Proverbs, Lech el hanabal. If you want to learn about life, we could even learn from the lowly ants. You know, we could learn from ants. We could learn industriousness. We could learn hard work. We could learn the importance of a community, okay? And we could learn from monkeys as well. Turns out that just like 1 out of 6 children around the world are wired in a way that they're prone to anxiety, 1 out of 6 monkeys, same thing, okay? So, I'm going to tell you something fascinating about these monkeys. Here's what we know about the monkeys. You see that monkey? And you see how that monkey is cuddling into his or her mother. It's at the moment that an SST, the supersonic transport plane, which are no longer around, but they are flying over this monkey preserve, naturalistic monkey preserve belonging to Dr. Suomi, a well-known researcher in the area. And they know beforehand this monkey is a 1 in 6 monkey that falls apart at any kind of anxiety-provoking situation, especially a loud noise that breaks the sound barrier. Okay? Here is the ADHD monkey running to the top of the tree to try to catch the SST. But I want to go back to talking about this monkey. Let me talk to you all about this monkey, because there's something fascinating that I think is very important to hold on. And it's a fascinating lesson for ourselves and our own personal growth, and a fascinating lesson also in terms of handling friends or family or children who might be anxious. Here's what we know. If this monkey has a tough life, let's say this monkey grows up with instability, let's say this monkey grows up with harsh parenting or harsh treatment, or let's say this monkey has a mother who becomes ill and dies, they're not going to do well. They're much more at risk than the rest of the population in handling the major tragedies of life. But here's the most important take-home message on these monkeys. The most important take-home message is that if they're giving a loving, protected life, if they continue to grow up with the protective shield of this mother, guess what? They grow up to be the leaders of the pack. Not only do they do okay, not only are they resilient, but they're the future leaders. I've been in practice now for over 40 years. And I do a lot of work with anxious kids, starting when they're very young, and then I see them a little later when they're older, and I see them and try to give them coping tools, try to teach them how to talk to themselves to calm themselves down, how to teach them how to avoid avoidance, which I'll talk to you about in a few minutes, try to teach their parents how to handle them. And one of the things that I've learned is that at certain transition points, they have to come in again, and they have to basically get a checkup again, and then they do fine. As adults, the ones who were helped by their parents and their educators and their friends in their community to face their fears a little bit at a time, and who were surrounded by the love of family and community, they're today's leaders. I know them now as adults. They're the ones running the schools. They're the ones running companies very successfully. Think about it. Think of the anxious people you know. Don't they connect incredibly deeply? Don't they often have a higher level of empathy than the average person? They can grow up to be the leaders of the pack. They could go in either direction. It's interesting. I'll see people at certain predictable times in their life. It's just a model that I've used along with some of my colleagues in dealing with anxiety. So I'll see them, let's say, at the beginning of preschool. Then I'll see them again when they're moving into a new building at the beginning of middle school, the beginning of high school, when they go off to study in Israel, when they get married, the big transitions in their life. And usually when I finish seeing them for, let's say, a couple of months to do a refresher on the toolbox of coping mechanisms, I'll tell their mother or father, I'll probably see you again when he or she starts, is getting ready to date or getting ready to go off to study for the gap year in Israel. So one year, there was a kid who I started with in pre-K. In grade aught or whatever? I love what you call that. Grade? Yeah, you guys really know how to speak English so much better than we do, okay? So he gets married. And about a week after he's married, I get a phone call from him. He's in charge now of his treatment, and he wants an appointment. He says, I need one of those refresher courses from you. It's a big change. And he comes with a little envelope. And he says, I don't know what this is. My mother wrote you a little note. So I opened up the note. It's 3 words. Right on schedule. Right on schedule. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so next point is the importance of managing expectations. It's called here, I'm going to talk about, that's Hebrew for we could learn from the ants, we could learn from the monkeys. Here's the elevator analogy I got from a close colleague, a psychologist and fellow professor at Yeshiva University, Rabbi Dr. Johnny Krug. Is he connected to here? No, okay. So Rabbi Dr. Krug told me this analogy. I just love it for understanding anxiety. He paints a picture of somebody taking an elevator to, let's say, the 67th floor of the Empire State Building in Midtown Manhattan, down the block from our women's campus. And it's a very crowded elevator. It's the height of rush hour. And you're in the elevator near the door. You're getting off at the 67th floor. And there's some guy behind you invading your personal space. You can't take it. It's like it's one thing to wait. It's like he's jockeying for a good position to be able to run out of the elevator when it hits his floor. Let's say he's getting off at the 53rd floor. And you are so furious, you're ready to give him the dirtiest look that you have. You're going to give him the dirtiest look. You know how it makes you feel better? Somebody cuts you off on the highway or is going too slow or too fast. Somehow makes you feel better when you just shoot them one of those wilting looks. I don't know why, but it does. Maybe not here, but in New York for sure. It's the way you cope with driving on the Cross Bronx Expressway in New York. Okay? So he's getting ready to get off at his floor, and you're ready with your dirtiest look. You look back at him, and you see that he's blind. He can't see. And what's hitting in your back is a cane. He's trying to steady himself. It's not easy to keep your balance in a crowded elevator at the height of rush hour at 5 to 9 in the morning in the Empire State Building. What does that knowledge do to your emotional mood? Your righteous indignation turns to be nosei ba'olim chavero. The Hebrew term is you want to reach out. You want to share in his burden. You just want to help him. You want to be there. And you start helping him off to guide him. Your feeling in a rush gives way to just wanting to help out. Your whole emotional reaction shifts. That's the mindset that we have to hope for when in the course of either parenting or grandparenting or being close to somebody who's very anxious, we have to go to understanding. To be understood, first understand. We have to go to a place of empathy. Okay? Now, what do we know about the kids who I described, similar to those monkeys, who graduate from an anxious style to a style where they're able to gradually go on the slow pathway to going from anxious to being leaders? Here's what their parenting looks like in longitudinal studies done by Dr. Jerome Kagan at Harvard. Okay? So the first thing to remember is don't blame yourselves if you have a family member or a child or grandchild who's anxious. It's what your kid does for a living. In an incredible series of experiments done by Dr. Plomin, he looked at a large group of kids who were adopted at birth. And he looks at them at age 3. And he asks a simple question. Is their anxiety level now, is their level of anxiety, is it more like the psychological parents, the adoptive parents who were raising them, which it should be? You know, if the parents raising them are anxious, they should be anxious also. Or is it more like the biologic parents they never met? Guess what? Turns out it has no correlation whatsoever with their real parents, the parents raising them. It's totally correlated to the biological parents they never knew. There's a very strong genetic component. But again, like everything else in life, biology could be overridden by love. There's a wonderful Jewish saying. It was quoted last night. Ahava mekalkelet hashura. Love breaks the straight line. With love and support and believing in your child, it's a game changer. And that's what this says, okay? It says that when parents, parent in a way that they allow their children to avoid facing anxiety-provoking events, it's not too terrific. It's not too great, and they don't overcome it. And let's say the parents are anxious themselves because they're biologically predisposed. So normally they take their 6-7-year-old child to a birthday party, okay? But they don't want to because they get a little nervous. So the kid says, I don't want to go to this party or to this get-together at a friend's house because you're socially anxious. If you do that, the child's not going to get better. You have to gently push them just past their point of comfort. Okay? So here's my first main take-home recommendation to you all. Okay? Both for yourselves, for your family members, for your children. Okay? Avoid excessive reassurance. Okay? We know that anxious children will ask for a lot more reassurance than others. Automatically, we're going to want to automatically say, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. That's what parents do. You have to go against that automatic desire. You have to go against it. You have to check yourself. You have to, the Musar masters, the Jewish masters of self-improvement say that in life, there's a nekudat habachira, there's a point of choice. Okay, or as Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space lies our choice, and that space lies our growth. So our kid is asking for reassurance. Pull back for a second. Okay? And what you do there is instead of saying everything will be okay, you instead initially ask, what can you say to yourself that might make it more okay? Pull it back on them. You want them to learn how to self-soothe. It may seem like a small thing. It's not. Okay, the challenge here is to teach self-soothing, is to teach your child how to take it over. And then gradually, you do it little by little until they get used to it. because you can't constantly provide them with the crutch. Okay, without the crutch, you may need the crutch short term, but you want to get them to the point that they're able to stand on their own 2 feet. Okay? Okay, you may let them know if you've never done this before, you don't want to throw this on them right away. You may want to do it a little bit at a time. We're good? Okay. Here we go. I wanted to talk a little bit about anxiety as the source of motivation. Okay? There's fascinating research that shows that not only can anxiety be a source of leadership, anxious people often say they thrive on a little bit of anxiety. It motivates them. You know? Not a bad thing to hold on to. I'm going to develop this a little bit more, okay? So I'm going to say here on the upside of anxiety, I'm going to talk now about something called desirable difficulties. There's a brilliant Jewish source that says the following: Ein Adam Omed al Divrei Torah, Ela im kein nichshol behem. We can't master growth. We can't master internalization of Jewish values without struggle. There's no growth in life without hitting obstacles, without some kind of struggle. And what it says here of anxiety is interpreted is, this isn't the end of the world. I could grow through this. I could handle it. And to say to yourself, I could handle this. I could do it. And you help your child gradually get to that point, or help yourself, you'll accomplish even more than you would without the anxiety at all. Now I'm going to develop this in a little bit of a more, in a little bit of a richer way. First, I'm going to talk about some of the cognitive research on something that's called desirable difficulties. Let's say in this PowerPoint, we already have it. I didn't mean to have it, but the left side is cut off, okay? Let's say every third slide was out of focus. You know what the research shows? You would remember those out-of-focus slides better than anything else I talked about. Because when we have to struggle a little bit, even in that minor way, we master it better. And that's why we arranged to have the left side cut off. Right? Right? Okay. So this is recognized in Paris. We're recognizing this research. Every year they have something called the Festival of Errors, where they celebrate children's mistakes. And in the tech industry, they have something called FailCon, where people come and share their mistakes. And the Jewish education world, there's now something sponsored by the Kohelet Foundation, where they have Jewish educators from around the world present an innovative program they tried that failed. Okay, and you could win, I think, $30,000 the Jewish educator keeps for himself or herself by talking about how this program failed, why it failed, and how you're going to grow from the growth. Tonight is the first yard site, the anniversary of my father's death, first year anniversary. Very privileged to be here. He always wanted to come here. He was invited to come here as a rabbi a number of times, and his doctor never cleared for him to come here. So there's something mystical about being here. But I'll tell you what he said in his final big public speech. He turned 96. He's a very beloved man in his community, and the community made him a massive party and dinner. It was a very, very well attended, a ton of people. And he gets up to speak, and here's the message he wanted to leave people. Here's what he said, quoting a secular source. He says, you know what? He says, the older I get, the more I realize that the key to wisdom and the key to success in life is to learn how to fail, keep on failing, but to learn how to fail better. And he said, my goal, now that I'm getting to the end of my years, is I want to learn how to make mistakes better. I want to learn how to grow better from my mistakes. And he did. He did. And he inspired a lot of people to do the same. The power of growing from our mistakes. Let me tell you the story of Keith Jarrett, and then the story of Dr. Oliner, okay? Here's the story of Keith Jarrett. Strange story, but an amazing story, okay? Keith Jarrett still is, one of the world's leading jazz pianists. In 1975, he was set to play in a concert, jazz piano concert in Cologne, Germany. Don't Google it now, but when you get home tonight, you could Google it, okay? Because you're going to want to listen to this concert, okay? So in 1975, he's set to play this concert. It's a concert hall, totally sold out, 6,000 people. Gets there early in the morning to start practicing on the concert piano. There was a young woman, I think, in late adolescence in charge. She was evidently brilliant at organizing conferences, as the people here are. And he goes to try on the piano. I'm not sure why this happened. It was a disaster. All of the keys on the left-hand side of the piano, no pads. Doesn't make music. Right-hand side, all of the keys on the right, no pads, no music. You can press down as hard as you want, you can't play music. The middle keys are out of tune, and if you press down really hard, it'll make music, but you really have to press down hard. It's really not usable. So he says, look, we have 6,000 people coming. You better get another piano. They look all over. She just couldn't find. There wasn't another concert-level piano available on such short notice. So he tells her, look, we might have to cancel this. And she's devastated. You could hardly imagine. This is really like an adolescent, late adolescence. You could imagine to be publicly shamed in your community in front of 6,000 people. He takes pity on her. And he says, okay, I'll do it. And he goes on with that piano to perform what has since become the all-time best-selling music recording in music history, okay? And the all-time best-selling jazz piece in history. Don't do it now, please, because I hear the concert. Some people have downloaded it already, okay? At the age of instant stuff. But here's the deal. You hear him huffing and puffing and pounding down on those center keys. But the challenge brought out a level of brilliance that has made music history. It's haunting. It brought out a genius in this musical genius that has never been seen before or since. It's the power of challenge, the power of allowing ourselves to mess up and to keep failing and fail better. That's where growth is. That's where we want to go in life. Second story I want to share with you is a study that is not your typical study. This is the story of Dr. Oliner. When Dr. Oliner was 10 years old, in his small town in Europe, on a horrible, horrible day in the small town in Europe, the Nazis, may their memory be forever erased, as we get ready for Purim, the Nazis line up every Jew in that small Polish town, and in front of Sam Oliner, this 10-year-old boy, they machine gunned to death everybody he ever knew, his father, his mother, his grandparents, his siblings, everybody in the town. The entire town was butchered. In the chaos, the 10-year-old boy runs away, comes to a farmhouse on the outskirt of town. And in that farmhouse, he knocks on the door. And the man and woman who owned the farmhouse, they see him. They figure out this is one of those Jewish children. They take him in. And at risk to their lives and the lives of everybody they knew, these righteous Gentiles took in the future Dr. Oliner. They treat him like one of their own. They raise him with love. They protect him and treat him unbelievably for the remaining horrible years of the war. The end of the war, he has an uncle who survived, who comes and takes him, brings him actually to the neighborhood I grew up in, where he's raised. And he goes on, and he gets a PhD in sociology, marries a woman with the PhD in sociology, and they dedicate their entire careers to going to Europe on a regular basis, interviewing every righteous Gentile they could find. And they ask a simple question: what kind of parenting did these future righteous Gentiles have? What was it all about? He wrote a series of books, amazing books, some of my favorite books on parenting. What creates a moral giant? What creates the courage, one of the themes of this conference, to do what these people did? First thing that happened is every place they went to, the people who they tried to interview didn't understand the question. They all said the same thing. What? How could you do what? To them it was so obvious, they just didn't understand how you could think otherwise. If you want to hear, I'm going to leave with you on Dr. Jarrett's wisdom, one of the core ingredients of raising a moral giant. It was, how were mistakes handled? How were mistakes handled in those homes? If you made a mistake in the home of a future righteous Gentile, it wasn't dealt with yelling. It wasn't dealt with screaming or criticism or anything like that. It was dealt with the calm response that calmly said, look, we know you're better than this. We know you're better than this. Let's figure out how you could make it right. They're always held to this standard calmly. We believe in you. We believe in you, but how could you make reparations for what you've done? Okay? You treated another child in your class in a way that's not up to our standards. Let's really talk about it. Let's put our heads together on how you could really make up with this child. Okay? And it was done with such calmness and such belief in their ability to hold up, and there was tremendous clarity. This is the code of conduct. Clarity without guilt. Clarity without guilt. It's fascinating. You don't think about it. Okay? One of the ways you shape your children is how you handle the mistakes that they make. Okay? And it's hard. I was saying in the earlier talk I just gave that one of the keys to parenting is how do you harness anxiety, that numerical equivalent of love and worry, ava and daga. Okay. Next thing I want to talk about, just briefly, is the neurosurgeon study, and then I'll move on. Okay? Neurosurgeon study. I love this slot. I think, is it true that I have a whole hour here? Like I could just keep going. Great. I could do whatever I want. Okay? Okay. If I repeat myself, just remind me. Okay. Here goes. The neurosurgeon study goes like this. Dr. Bosk in the University of Pennsylvania Medical School, okay, where I went to graduate school in their different program there. But Dr. Bosk is a sociology professor at the Penn Medical School. And he does the following study. He's an expert on medical error. He wrote a wonderful book, if anybody's really into this, with a great title. It's Forgive and Remember. Forgive and remember. Not forgive and forget. He says it would be a tragedy if we forgive and forget. We have to learn the lessons of an interaction that requires forgiveness. You can't just forgive and forget. You forgive and remember. But you don't remember in a way that you beat yourself up. You remember in a way that those righteous Gentiles remembered, in a way that energizes you. So we asked the following question. Any neurosurgeons in the audience? I'm sure there are. This is South Africa, some of the best doctors anywhere. Okay? So here's what he does. He wants to look at the top 1% of neurosurgeons, those who have the best track record in doing brain surgery on their patients, and compare them to the bottom 1%. The bottom 1%, okay? Those who are so bad that after all those years of training, years of medical school, and then years of general surgery training, and then specialized training in central nervous system surgery, and then subspecialized. Ultimately, it takes a long, long time, at least in the United States, I imagine here also. It's really it's brain surgery, okay? And if after all those years, the bottom 1% are so bad at what they do, they lose their attending privileges at their hospital, they're fired. They're not allowed anywhere near a patient. And he interviewed large numbers of people in the top 1% and the bottom 1%. And guess what? The number one predictor was of being in the top 1%. Top 1%, it's not what you'd think. Not their manual dexterity, not the medical residency and training program they went to, not their medical school admission scores, not their grade point average in high school or in university. Guess what the number one predictor was? How they handled their mistakes. A top 1% neurosurgeon, if he or she lost a patient, God forbid, they would not go home till they figured out how to change setback to feedback. They would just not go home. They would change threat to challenge. They would call up every leading neurosurgeon around the world saying, did I miss something? They go to the library, read every abstract they could find. They'd go to the animal lab to try the surgery over and over again on those poor animals. Sorry for that, but that's what they would do, okay? And they literally would stay up all night until they were certain that the next time they did this surgery, they were equipped in a whole different way. That's what made for greatness. How you handle mistakes. You know, in Hebrew, the Hebrew word for sin, chet, has a whole different connotation than it does in the non-Jewish world. The Hebrew word for chet, you know what it means? It comes from the passage, okay? From the passage, it's talking about the sharpshooters of the tribe of Benjamin. They were great sharpshooters. And they would take their bow and arrow, and they would never miss the mark. You know how you say that in Hebrew? Lo yachti. So the word chet means to miss the mark. It's fascinating psychologically, the difference in viewing chet as missing the mark. Because then it means not that you're an evil person. You have a do-over. You try again. And you keep on trying, and you keep on failing, and you keep on failing. You just have to learn how to fail better. That's the key. That's the key. Bottom 1%, you read the interviews of Dr. Bosk. The bottom 1%, what they say is shown. They say, oh, yeah, I lost this patient, but the nurses, they're horrible in this hospital. Externalizing me, those horrible nurses. Or the lighting, why don't they pay their electric bill? I can't see into a patient's brain. Not taking any responsibility. When you go through life, not learning how to learn, and it's hard to do. It's hard to do. It's not so easy to say, I was wrong. It's not so easy to even, and you could parent a child that way that doesn't undermine your authority. Okay, there's a way to do it that models for them the greatest gift we could give them. Okay? To change setback to feedback and to go from threat to challenge. Okay, now I'm going to go to a little bit of a different focus. But first I'm going to talk about Clever Hans. Okay? And here's Clever Hans, because it's making an important point before I get to this final slide. I think final slide. We'll figure it out. Anybody know the story of Clever Hans? This is a farm in Germany in the late 1800s. Word comes out to the world in Europe that there's a horse that's a genius in math. You could ask this horse any math question, no matter how advanced, and Hans will patiently tap out the answer, unerringly correct. People are coming from all over Europe to see the genius horse. Nobody could trick Clever Hans. They're literally huge numbers of people overrunning the farm of this poor German farmer, and it's a little destroying his life. He's not charging for it. He's cursed with a horse that's a genius in math. I should be so lucky, okay? So a psychologist at the time, I love stories that have psychologists as heroes. Psychologist at the time hears about the genius horse. He travels to the farmhouse, knocks on the door of the farmer, and he says, excuse me, I heard about your horse. I'm a psychologist. If it's true that your horse could do higher level math, we have to totally reshape our understanding of human versus animal intelligence. You mind if I hang out with your horse a little bit? The farmer says, please, help me figure out what's happening. I want to get my life back. I want to go back to my regular life. Psychologist comes. He asks Hans the most advanced questions. If the answer is 21, taps 21 and stops. If the answer is 110, taps 110 and stops. The psychologist is flabbergasted, but then he figures it out. He takes the screen, just like this, and he puts the horse behind the screen so that Hans can hear the question, but can't see the questioner. Now, Hans can't get a single question right. Can't get a single question correct, okay? Why? We all know the answer. Horses aren't geniuses in math. Horses can't do math. They're very good in picking up the nonverbal. If the answer is 314, at 314, the pupils of the questioner subtly dilate. There's a look of expectation in his or her eyes. Their breathing patterns subtly change. Their skin color subtly changes. Horses are great at that. Think of our children. Do we believe in them or do we not believe in them? Think of our spouse. You ever notice that you're funnier when people think you're funny? Okay, if you hadn't laughed at any of my jokes, I probably would have gone home. Okay? Okay? We're laughing that much, but okay, you're laughing nicely. South Africa is a very polite society. Okay, and you come from Lithuanian stock, as I do, many of you, and I understand the differences in humor. I grew up with it. I get it, okay? Although I may be misunderstanding the culture here, but by the way, audiences in New York are so different parts of the world, but you're the warmest society I know anywhere in the world. Wherever I go, I'm not just making this up. I love South Africans. I really do. Seriously, I'm telling you, there's a depth of connection. I can't keep meeting people because we keep befriending everybody because they're so amazing to us. Just unbelievable. And then what do? We have to go home, back to New York, where people are going to be cursing at me because of the way I drive like an old man on the highways of New York City. Anyway, you want to stay away from me if you're driving in New York City. So that's what we have to remember with our children. We have to remember with our children is they know if we believe in them. And just like we're funnier when people think we're funnier, research shows we're smarter when people think we're smart. And there's a magnificent thought from Rabbeinu Tzadok of Lublin, great rabbi with tremendous insight. Here's what he says. Kishem shetzarech adam lahamin b'Hashem yisparach. Just like we have to raise our children to believe in God, kach tzarech achar kach lahamin ba'atzmo. So too do we have to raise them afterwards to believe in themselves. Ratza lomar sheyesh lakadosh baruch hu esek imo. God believes in us. Shein poel batel shebein laila hayo vein laila avad. We're not an insignificant being. Here one day and gone the next. We matter. We matter. And I'm going to end with this story. I just got the 10-minute warning, okay? So here's the concluding story. And it's what I find to be, I shared this in Durban when I first arrived in South Africa. And it's just, I think, a story that I felt I have to share with you on coping with tough times. Life is partly about loss, okay? It's partly about going through hard times. As we're told, life is a gesher tsar mode. We're all walking on a very narrow bridge. Okay? And there's change around us. And there's all kinds of loss. There's loss of people we're close to. There's loss of people who we know who start losing their cognitive skills. There's loss of fights, loss of having fights, losing close friends, loss of people moving to a different part of the world. Life's about loss. And what's the way of dealing with that kind of anxiety? And the best way I know of talking about it is I'm going to turn to the Talmud and then tell you my concluding story. In the Talmud, 3 times in the Talmud Bavli, there's a disagreement between Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Yassi about how to handle worry. It says, Daga blevish yashkan, if you have a worry in your heart, 2 ways of looking at it. You could either, yashkan midatu, you could push it away, distract yourself. Men, 80% of men are specialists in that. Or yasichen alacherim, you talk it out. You light up the language centers of the brain and you discuss it. Interestingly, none of the rabbis, none of the rabbinic commentaries say one way is better than the other. Because there's the deep wisdom of knowing you do what works. Over time, it changes. Over time, people who distract themselves can learn how to talk and vice versa. Because there's benefit to everything. But all the research shows that the rabbis of the Talmud going over the millennia had it right. My main area in the secular world is traumas, post-traumatic stress disorder. And I go at the height of the Second Intifada in Israel. I'm invited to spend a couple of weeks with the Death Notification Squad in Israel. It's a team of psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, mental health specialists, whose job is, if God forbid, if there's a terror bombing and somebody loses a father or a son, a mother, or a brother, whatever it is, they go, they knock on the door, they tell the horrible news, and they stay with them. And they were burning out, understandably. It's the worst job in the world. They know much more about trauma than I ever will, but they needed an outsider. There's a brilliant Jewish saying, Ein chavush ma'teretz momi beis, you can't free yourself from your own prison. So they needed me. And I spent an amazing time there, very intense and blown away by these people. One day, I'm giving a talk in the Jerusalem Trauma Center, and we hear a bomb go off. Phone rings. The Frank Sinatra cafeteria on the Mount Scopus campus, there was a bombing, a terror bomb. 9 people were killed, 7 of them Americans. Everybody in Israel knows everybody else. The phone in the Jerusalem Trauma Center starts ringing off the hook. The 40 therapists I'm working with goes running around to different parts of the country to let people know, you lost this family member. Horrific. And I'm left alone with the head of the clinic, the head of the center, and the associate head. Phone rings again. We just found out that a woman who works in a camp, summer camp, in the middle of the country was lost in the bombing. Say, please go to the camp. We have no therapists left. Spend the day there. Talk to the kids and help them cope. They saw the look of terror in my eyes, because my Hebrew is mostly a source of humor for people in Israel. So he took mercy on me and sent the associate director there. And we go to the camp. We get there. And the Israeli director puts us in the corner. He's not going to let us do anything except what he tells us to do. They're certainly not going to listen to an American. And he gets up, he tells the kids the horrible news, and he sets up 5 coping rooms. Rav Ami and Rav Asi coming alive in today's world. One room is a room where they wrote letters to the parents of this woman about what a wonderful woman she was. A writing room. Another room, a music room. They expressed themselves musically. Another room was a room where they did art. Another room for prayer. And another room for talking. Kids were told you could go from room to room throughout the day. And they divided themselves exactly equally between 4 of the 5 rooms. None of them chose which room, everybody? Prayer. Very good. Very good. Prayer. It's too soon for prayer. Most people say talking. No. Quarter of the kids, we had an amazing day talking. And the writers wrote, and the music kids did music, the art kids did art, and here's where I come to my end. The next week, I was asked to speak at the first memorial service for 9/11. And after I speak, there's a woman waiting online to talk to me. And she says the following, because I told the story of the 5 Cobra. She said, you know something? My father is a Vishnitsa chassid who was Elie Wiesel's bunkmate in the camps. They were in that famous picture. They were in the same bunk. And they both survived the war, as we know. And she says, last week, Professor Wiesel was giving a talk in Manhattan, and I was on my way out to go, and my father, who lives with me, is still alive. He says, you know what? If you see Elie, I doubt he remembers me, but just tell him. Remind him. Tell him my name. And just tell him that all the guys who survived, all of us who survived, we get together all the time, and we're so proud of him. We're proud of his Nobel Prize. We're proud of everything he's done. Keep up the good work. She waits to talk to Professor Wiesel. She says, Dr. Wiesel, my father doesn't even know if you remember. She says his name. He starts crying. And he says, remember? He never told you that the only reason I've accomplished anything in life, the only reason I'm here, is because of your father, the chassid? He said there was a day that was horrible, even by concentration camp standards. And we were beyond endurance. And a group of Russian prisoners of war got a hold of some rat poison. And we looked at each other. We said, you know what? We're going to take matters into our own hands. We're going to take matters into our own hands. They're going to kill us anyway. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's have some control. He said every one of us waited online, intending to make that the last minutes of our life. Everybody but your father the chassid, retained his faith even there. And he goes to the side of the line, and he breaks into the ancient Vishnitsa tune, for Ani Mamin B'Emuna Shlema B'Vias HaMashiach. I believe in ultimate redemption. And that song broke our suicidal spell. One by one, we left the line, formed a circle around your father, and sang that song of hope. Coping comes in many different flavors. You have to find what works for you. But remember, there's always hope. The Hebrew word tikva is etymologically tied to the word kav, a rope. There's always the rope. We're never alone. We have the support of the community, the support of the love, the support of this amazing, amazing community. So thank you, everybody, for giving me this opportunity.